Today's competitive speculation for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is going to be Crawdaunt. Believe I'm saying that right. Now, Crawdaunt's typing is one I have covered before, which is Water Dark, and the offense of this typing is pretty decent. You have 5 super effectives, including some pretty popular typings like Ghost, and the amount of Pokemon that resist the Stole Stab is relatively low, so this does make for a consistent offensive typing. And the defensive spread is also not bad, as even though there are 5 typings this is weak to, this does have 6 resist, combined with the psychic immunity. So as I've said before, it's a fairly good typing. It's maybe not super optimized for the current meta, just because Fairy is a really big threat to this typing, but it otherwise is a very usable typing. Now, Crawdaunt has 3 abilities. The first one is Hyper Cutter, which prevents opponents from lowering its attack. That's a relatively consistent ability, but probably not the ideal ability to go for on this Pokemon. Next up is Shell Armor, which prevents opponents from critting you. Not really that useful, especially compared to the hidden ability, which is Adaptability. That increases your stab type damage, effectively doubling your stab. And if you combine that additional stab damage with the pretty good 120 physical attack stat, you do have a high amount of water and dark type offense on this Pokemon. Though the special attack is really not bad at 90, that because of how big of a bonus adaptability is, this is actually a usable offensive stat. Now, the bulk is not good, 63 on hit points and 85 on physical defense. That's okay, but the special defense is only 55, which is pretty bad. And the speed stat's also not particularly good at 55. That puts it in the same speed tier as Dudon Sparse as well as Brute Bonnet. So a quick look into what a 252 Adamant Crawdaunt actually looks like with adaptability bonus against a very physically defensive Cresselia. That knockoff is a guaranteed 2-hit KO, even after the item is removed from Cresselia. Even the Snarl really does okay amounts of damage without any investment. So the offense is definitely present here. The problem is that terrible special defense means this Moonblast with pretty much no special attack investment and not even a stab move is a guaranteed 2-hit KO onto Crawdaunt. So while it does do a lot of damage, it is also very squishy, meaning Crawdaunt is basically a glass cannon. Now, I showed off some of its better moves, such as Knockoff and Crab Hammer, but it does have other options. So on the physical side, there's Crunch and Razor Shell, as well as Night Slash, Payback and Fling, and even Liquidation. And on the special side, there's moves like Scald, which will most likely be taken off of it, should it be in Gen 9. Scald got removed from a lot of Pokemon in Gen 9. But there is Dark Pulse and Muddy Water, and even Surf and Hydro Pump. Now, this Pokemon does get a decent list of non-stab moves, so some of the highlights of that is Rock Slide, Revenge and Brick Break, Ice Beam and Blizzard, Sludge Bomb, Superpower, Close Combat, and Sludge Wave. And the supportive moveset, so you have moves like Taunt and Leer, and there are a few buffing moves like Dragon Dance and Nasty Plot, and there is even Iron Defense. So while not a particularly large amount of supportive options, the ones it does have access to are pretty decent. Crawdaunt is an interesting Pokemon because its adaptability offense is actually quite high, especially on the physical attack side, but the special attack is okay as well. And I remember in Gen 8 this Pokemon having a lot of trouble with getting hit by something and fainting instantly because of its very atrocious special bulk, combined with its middling speed, making it very likely to get hit by a hyper offensive Pokemon instantly and it's gone. But this Pokemon's offense is actually quite high, and that knockoff specifically does a ton of damage, especially to like a psychic type. And if you were running an item such as Choice Band or Life Orb, you're threatening a one-hit knockout onto very defensively built Pokemon if the hit is super effective. And even squishy Pokemon that knockoff is neutrally effective on still can threaten with a one-hit knockout if you're running a Choice Band, combined with the high damage Aqua Jet, as well as a very nice amount of offense with the Crab Hammer. This Pokemon is definitely an offensive threat that has to be considered when it does show up. The problem is it's very easy to deal with Crawdaunt. you just have Dazzling Gleam on your Flutter main, and it would have to be an Assault Vest build, probably behind a screen to actually live that hit, because it's just that squishy on the special side. Though with the Terrastalize gimmick, you can add adaptability to pretty much any typing you want with Crawdaunt. So you could turn it into a Steel type and then use Terra Blast for a very high amount of Steel type offense that would definitely one-hit KO a Flutter main. Though that is a lot of commitment and you would still be weak to fighting. So while even with the Terrastalize gimmick, I do see a lot of potential for getting some really good reads that lead to some critical knockouts, I don't think Crawdaunt is a very consistent pick because of the poor bulk combined with the mediocre speed stat. It's just hard to position and basically requires a read to get any benefit from its offense. And its offense really isn't even worth playing into when there are Pokemon like Urshifu around. Surging Strikes and Wicked Blow do a ton of damage because of their guaranteed crit, and combine that with Urshifu's higher attack stat than Crawdaunt, you actually get more offense out of Wicked Blow and Surging Strikes than you would out of the Crab Hammer and knockoff of this Pokemon. Or if not higher, a very similar amount. And Urshifu is a much better Pokemon in general because its ability can punch through Protect, giving you much more consistent offense. So while I do think there are a few scenarios where Crawdaunt could be viable or even quite useful, it really does struggle with its poor stats, and I think that is definitely going to keep it from being anywhere near a meta pick. Most likely, if Crawdaunt were added into Gen 9, it would see next to no tournament usage, and very little usage on the ladder, because I think there are Pokemon that simply outclass its capacity. With the way VGC works, there are scenarios that you can set up Crawdaunt to be quite useful. It's just those are very few and far between, though it could make a decent counter to Trick Room teams, just because its offense matches very well into current Trick Room meta. But again, I believe there are more consistent options available to deal with Trick Room than Crawdaunt. So if I were to place it on a tier list, probably around C tier, possibly even D. It's really hard to work around. But if you were to run this Pokemon, I would highly recommend speccing as much into the offense as possible, because that is about the only point this thing has. Basically ignore bulk entirely to maximize its one-hit KO potential. If you want to try to add some consistency to it, run it Choice Scarf with a speed control Pokemon. That way you may be able to set up a scenario where you can get a one-hit knockout onto a hyper-offensive Pokemon. But that takes setup, and if your opponent reads it, you're basically sunk, because Crawdaunt's not consistent enough to outplay its way out of a bad scenario. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.